Hi, Mike. Well, I appreciate you making a video response to my comments. Thank you for that. You said that that you wanted to see just one case of someone going against their conscience to carry out, an evil instruction in the Quran. And actually, in my comment before, what I said was that a lot of the people who are influenced by the Quran are at a stage where perhaps they don't have much of a conscience except what is formed during that instruction. You get 15-year-olds, and if you know a typical 15-year-old, they're pretty much absent a conscience unless someone's been pounding it into them. And if what's pounded into them is, for example, Surah 47 of the Quran, then that's going to be their conscience. But again, that's just a logical argument. What you really asked for was an example of that. And yeah, I can't go and find someone and tell their life story. I don't have that. But there is a historical example, I suppose. At some point, you were making the argument that that what was really going on is that these people were being oppressed and they were fighting oppression, and the Quran was a useful crutch in that, perhaps. But the real driver was this practical oppression. But if you look back in history, to the time of Muhammad, yeah, he did start as a sort of oppressed minority. It's true. He was in war, but at some point, they started conquering a lot of people, and they eventually took over the whole Middle East and all of North Africa. And at some point, it must have dawned on them that they were no longer being oppressed, and that they didn't need to keep conquering until they were finally beaten back. So I guess that would be my example of people who had every opportunity, to stop and be peaceful, and kept fighting. You could certainly argue that this is just another case of people being driven, in this case, by greed, which is another external force, and that the Quran, once again, is simply serving as a useful tool in the support of that. But just to, I guess, reinforce how focused the Quran is on being used in that way, there are, and I don't have the exact quotes, but they're somewhere in the Quran, Allah does threaten people who hang back. It's the job of every Muslim to fight, whether they want to or not. That's pretty damn useful. It's a written text, and it's also something that's been promulgated in places where most people didn't read, or if they were reading, that was the text. That's how they learned to read, by reading that text. And meaning that it was always delivered to people in the context of an instructor. So there's always a person there with his agenda, whatever it is, feeding this Quran to students. So it's very hard to separate just the written text from the person that's teaching the text. Moreover, it's hard to separate that person from the people that taught him the text. And it's also difficult to separate the text from the culture of the people that are teaching each other these ideas. So I guess it becomes very difficult to talk about the text independently, having its own independent influence, apart from whatever's going on around it. So I find the whole position that the text must be innocent and it's all externalities to be a little bit artificial. I'd say the text is part of the people, and if it's a violent culture, then you could have a violent text, and it helps people be violent. The history's there. History's there. I think Islam has been a militaristic and expansionist ideology from the time of its founding. That's truly my belief, and as I read the Quran, I don't see a lot to dissuade me of that opinion. Now, something else you should know about me, I constantly find myself responding to these atheist-targeted issues, and I'm not actually an atheist myself, although what I say is that most religious people would call me an atheist, because I don't actually, I certainly don't believe in what appears to be the Christian God, really, but yeah, I do think there is a place for religious sentiment. I do think it inspires people to do good things, and some of the very best things that it inspires people to do can be found in the Bible. And I did a video back sometime quoting Paul, Corinthians 13 maybe. Yeah, and I think there's some very good stuff in the Bible. I don't find that stuff in the Quran, and all religions are not created equal, really. At another point, you talk about cutting out the bad parts of religion. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Cut out the bad parts. But I think it's a mistake to start from the premise that all religions are equal, or rather that religion is sort of as a whole inviolable because you just made it impossible to cut out the bad parts. When something's inviolable, you can't cut out pieces of it. So I do think that one has to take the stance that religion is first of all criticizable, and then you can take out the bad parts, and then you might end up with something good. I think the bad parts of Christianity, the bad part of Christianity is the fantasy, the imagining that somebody came back from the dead. I think this has got to be a lie. That's got to be false. On the other hand, Christianity tells you to do good things, to love your neighbor. That's great. So if we could keep that part and get rid of the fantasy part, then Christianity would be perfect. And for Islam, if we could get out all those parts of the Quran that, whatever the context you want to establish, get out the parts of the Quran that talk about killing people and beheading and tying them up and, all that stuff, all that hellfire stuff. I don't know if the New Testament talks about hellfire. I guess it's got Revelation, sure. You can get rid of that one too. If we get rid of all the hellfire, the cutting the heads off and slay them where you find them kind of stuff, get that stuff out, that'd be great, fine. But will Islam allow that without claiming to be under attack? Anyway, I too very much appreciate the opportunity to have a reasoned discussion about religion, and if you have a reply, that's great. Otherwise, whatever. Thanks. Bye.